On an ordinary Easter Sunday, we would have broken up our processional hymn, and we would have, at the end of verse 3 or verse 4, have stopped here at what would have been our Easter garden. We would have said a prayer, we would have brought out the incense, the asperges, we would have blessed our Easter garden, and then we would have picked up the hymn and carried along with the choir and the acolytes into the sanctuary. We had high hopes for our Easter garden this year. We thought we'd done a snap-up job on our Christmas creche. All sorts of hands had conspired to make it really quite special, quite Italian. And this year we thought we would do another snap-up job on our Easter garden. Not that there weren't some objections from various corners of the parish, along the lines that the best Easter gardens are made of moss and sticks and plasticine and a few daffodils heaped around a large yogurt container lying on its side with a papier-mâché donut rolled in front of it to represent the stone that sealed the tomb. The Easter sermon would have been on one of the Gospels. It would have been a story which reflected the emotions and the narrative surrounding Mary Magdalene in the garden, thinking that Jesus was the gardener, or the three Marys encountering the angel in the tomb waiting for them, or the narrative and the emotions and the story and the buzz surrounding Peter and John as they made their way to the empty tomb. And the thought is that by virtue of this Easter garden made by the children or the people of our parish, and in a sermon which opened up the events that took place in the garden and around the garden tomb, is that you could be there too, and that you would have access to that garden. And though you lived in Rome, or though you lived in Stoke-on-Trent, or though you lived in Badger's Elbow, Nebraska, you could participate in the story and get a little bit of it on you. Preaching on an Easter gospel, it's what I've done for 36 years, but these are unusual times, and a number of the habits of a lifetime have been deep-sixed. And so on Easter 2020, unusually, I want to reflect on the lesson, which is from the Acts of the Apostles, the 10th chapter, which Eduardo read earlier. The events that take place there take place far from Jerusalem, on the coast, somewhat north. They begin when the servants of a senior non-commissioned officer in the Italian garrison named Cornelius are sent to then Joppa, now Jaffa, to collect Peter and to bring him to see Cornelius in Caesarea, which is farther up the coast. Cornelius has been told by an angel that Simon Peter has something important to tell him. And Peter's sermon is essentially an Easter sermon. It recounts the events of the death, the crucifixion, and the resurrection of Christ. But it recounts them to someone outside the fold, to a Gentile. It recounts them to somebody who has no immediate recourse to the religion of Israel, and perhaps no interest at all in the details. All of those clever things which preachers pepper their Easter sermons with in order to bring you to the garden, in order that you might experience something of the smells and the sounds and the colors and the characters and the details of all of these stories. Cornelius would not have understood anything about the burial habits of the Jews, or the hierarchy of the temple. The only name he would have recognized would have been his own boss, Pontius Pilate. Peter's sermon could have contained more detail. It could have had a crash course on Judaism. It could have brought Cornelius to the beach at Tabgha and the miraculous catch of fish. It could have brought him to the room with the doors all locked where Christ appeared to his disciples. It could have brought him to the road to Emmaus. It could have brought him there. What are the songs that we sing? Were you there? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when Joseph of Arimathea undertook all the details of his burial? Were you there when the earth trembled and the soldiers fled? Were you there when Mary turned twice and finally, after a false start, recognized her friend and her Lord there in the garden? Were you there when Peter and John stooped into the tomb and had their eyes adjust to the gloom there within? You were not there. It takes a certain amount of book learning and not a little research and a fair bit of effort to bring you there by the inclusion of mental pictures, all those little details of name and place, the effort of all of your possibly long dead Sunday school teachers who sat with you when you were small, gluing and sticking and setting up bits of wax and sticks and moss and daubing the final creation with poster paints. Cornelius could not be there, nor was Peter at particular pains to supply him with all the details necessary to bring him there. Cornelius the centurion sent for Peter to be brought where he was, though, to his house in Caesarea, with his contemporary hunger to have the spiritual yearning of his soul satisfied, with the particular promise of the angel that this man, Peter, would have the words necessary to take him where he needed to be. You cannot be in the garden yourself, in spite of all the imaginative exercises which we as a church might undertake. You are here, now, in lockdown in Italy, in a time of pandemic, far from your families, far from your usual schedule and regime, far from where you imagined you would be 2 months ago. In the doubting Thomas story in the Gospel of John, Jesus appears in a room with the doors all locked and where the normal means of entry would seem to be denied. He is there nonetheless. He speaks. Peter begins his sermon by telling Cornelius that he has come to understand that it doesn't matter to what nation the Roman centurion belongs, nor that he shares no common history with the Jews. Where the Roman is, at the present moment, and in the present time, is completely and absolutely the right time and the right place. God has acted in power through his Son and wants this power to be proclaimed. In the verses which follow our reading, the Spirit of God falls mightily upon the gathered crowd in Cornelius' house, and they begin to exhibit the signs that they have been incorporated into the mission of God. You are here and now. Go lightly with the details. Don't sweat the small stuff, especially if it leaves you farther away from the point of your redemption. Start here. Start now. Don't fret overmuch about wasted time in the past. Everybody in the Easter story starts again. Everybody starts afresh. Sinners become saints. They pick up their nets again and fish. They start new roads in middle age, leaving the old ways behind. Where they are, the time and the place in which they live is a perfectly acceptable place to meet Christ in his power and beauty. It is for them, it can be for you.